Do you know what it means to have a dysregulated nervous system? Because the term nervous system regulation is a term that's been thrown around quite often. And I just want to delve into this and give a bit of a background understanding of what it means. So if we this is discuss the nervous system, first of all, we have to look at a bit of a mind map of it. First of all, we have the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. And if we think about the evolutionary process, that really is the first part of how our nervous system has evolved. Now, through natural selection, it seems as though the evolutionary process has played a role in developing the peripheral nervous system, and we've begun to get more limbs, a bit more dexterity, but also this ability to have what we call our sensory information, so through our somatic nervous system, and also we have our ability to perceive the touch, what we see, what we hear, what we feel, and that's interpreted and sent information back to the brain to help navigate what our perception and experience is. We also have the motor nervous system, which is information that comes down from the brain to create voluntary contraction of muscles and even involuntary contractions of muscles, such as the diaphragm and intercostal muscles during breathing. On the right-hand side here, we've got the autonomic nervous system. And when people talk about the nervous system and nervous system dysregulation or regulation, they're really talking about the autonomic nervous system. So let's dive into these two. First of all, we have what we call the sympathetic nervous system, and this has a role in increasing our level of arousal to make us feel alert, to activate the stress response. In that, what it's going to do, it's going to increase heart rate, increase blood pressure, increase respiratory rate. We're going to get dilation of the pupils, dilation of the bronchioles, so more air in and out, to prepare us for the fight or flight. However, on the other side, they've got the parasympathetic nervous system. And when I was in school, I always tried to remember which one was which by remembering what's the role of a parachute. The role of the parachute is to slow us down. And therefore, the role of the parasympathetic nervous system is to help to decrease arousal and put us more into a restful state. And it's not as if one of them's on and one of them's off. It's literally a pendulum or is a tone in essence. So there's a balance to this. And when someone has a dysregulated nervous system, we're starting to consider the overall balance there's a mismatch there. So the primary nerve that's involved in the parasympathetic nervous system is what we call the vagus nerve. And this vagus nerve, actually 80% of the information is coming from the body back to the brain. And therefore it has a role in really interpreting our internal senses and creating our experience. But the vagus nerve is also controlling what we call our heart rate. There's a part of the vagus nerve that is digging into the heart to slow it down. So when we go into that parasympathetic state, we can actually increase vagal tone to bring down the heart rate. The extent at which that's done is the extent at which an individual can feel rested. So when it comes to understanding states and understanding how this vagus nerve can interact with our mind, Stephen Porges has given us a concept which is basically called the Polyvagal theory. And in that theory, he has given us 3 different states. A state where someone can be safe, curious, connected, and basically explorative of their own body, their own mind, their own sensations. This is someone who has a higher heart rate variability. In life, there's stresses. There's times, there's periods, there's acute moments where we need to be in a state of reactivity. We need to be able to increase our excitability in our brain. We need to be able to run away, escape, get excited, and actually move faster. We need to be able to mobilize energy. We need to be on a detection of threat or detection of trying to win and compete. And this step is basically putting us into what we call a sympathetic state. Aligns with the nervous system, right? Now, if a threat becomes imminent, or if someone feels as if they don't have the capacity to deal with threat and it causes overwhelm, that will then put us into what we call a dorsal vagal state. And this is almost like a freeze state. In animals, this would show up as a literal freeze. In a predator-prey situation, the prey might go into a freeze, into a tonic immobilization, drop to the ground and play possum in the hope that the predator will say it's either dead or just no longer has enjoyment in chasing after it, so it leaves it be. And then it can jump back into the sympathetic response and go again. However, humans, we suppress our stresses. We become shameful of them. We become guilty. We have these emotions that we get stuck with and therefore can get stuck in different states. Being in a sympathetic state and even being in a chronic dorsal vagal state is going to be a sign of reduced heart rate variability, reduced vagal activity. The issue here is this concept of the information coming from our body to the brain. Now, when that information is coming from our body to the brain, in a healthy manner, in an explorative manner, we can explore our emotions. We can feel them, we can notice sensations, we can respond over reacting to them, and also they're only fleeting, they're an experience. However, when we're in different states, they grip us. We get angry rather than experiencing anger. It's the difference between in the emotion and actually exploring the emotion. And that's when the problem arises. Now, the reason this arises is, number one, because of trauma. Trauma essentially is something that is very novel. It's not happened before, and it causes a lot of high level of stress. And the nervous system can learn that very fast, although the pathway is not necessarily ingrained into the body yet. So the person can go in and out of different states and just have very different emotional experiences or sensational experiences, or maybe even avoidance experiences, and are very unconscious. However, we keep exposing ourselves to mild stressors or moderate stressors. Remember, the role of the nervous system is actually to generate a stress response, and that stress response is initiating the learning response, and that learning response is encoding epigenetics. Yes, we are becoming adaptive to our environment, whether that's internal in our mind, in our body, or the external. So eventually the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, learns that we need to heighten sympathetic arousal and decrease vagal arousal because stress is going to continue to come. That what we then get is we get an elevated stress response, and we continue to have elevation in the sympathetic response. And now we have what we call a sympathetic overdrive, i.e. a dysregulated nervous. The problem here is we get withdrawal of the vagus nerve. And remember that vagus nerve, its primary role is to increase or help assist in interpreting and feeling sensations in the body. So if we get a withdrawal of in vagus nerve, we get a withdrawal or a decrease in awareness of the sensations, which is concept of interoception, the bi-directional signaling process between the brain and body. What's going on in your heart, what's going on in your lungs, what's going on in your kidneys, what's going on in the fascia in your tissue. And all that information is going on together to send to our brain to interpret what state should we be in, how should we interpret in the world. So we have someone who's in a dysregulated state. They have a withdrawal of the vagal tone. They have a lack of interoceptive awareness and maybe a lack of interoceptive accuracy. Their ability to perceive what's going on in their body becomes an issue, and we have what's called a mind-body disconnect. That is being disconnected from the body, being dissociated from the body, and not understanding yourself. One of the primary reasons why we are seeing such mental health issues today is not necessarily down to mental health. It's down to a disconnect between understanding your own physiological sensations and how they relate to your own psychology and how that relates to your external social world or the external social world. It's a biopsychosocial issue. And we're going to talk about the mind-body connection in the next video. Hope you enjoyed this video. Leave some questions, subscribe, support the channel, and I will catch you for the next one.